After a quick stop in Tempe and a homecoming victory, Arizona State is back on the road, heading up to Utah this weekend for another last ever Pac-12 meeting between the Sun Devils and the 18th ranked Utes. Nick Borgia of Devil's Digest joined alongside our publisher Hode Rubino to preview this matchup. And Hode, when the 2023 schedule first came out and we saw that ASU was the next game on Utah's schedule after their home game against Oregon, it was reasonable to think that this could be a letdown game for the Utes. How much do you think this aspect can come into play, especially due to the fact that Utah just suffered one of its biggest losses ever, 35-6 on Saturday against Oregon?
I think there's some merit to that theory, Nick, because when you talk about letdowns can also happen after big wins. And I'm not taking anything away from the masterful job that the Arizona State defense did against Washington a couple weeks ago. But you also look at the fact that Washington was coming off a big win over Oregon, a win that was very significant in terms of their chances of winning the Pac-12 championship, let alone having a spot in the college football playoff. So while the ASU defense definitely had a great game plan and did have 2 weeks to prepare for the Huskies, I think there was some letdown factor over there if you look at that contest as example. And I know letdowns are kind of a funny thing because everybody warns you about it. Coaches are going to talk about it all week, and players can say and maybe do all the right things in the days leading up to the game. But once the game starts, it just seems like sometimes it's an unavoidable aspect that does affect the game. So on the flip side of a letdown, this can also happen after a loss, let alone after a lopsided loss, like you mentioned. Utah did suffer against Oregon at home, no less. I think that when it comes to Utah, their physical toughness is obviously the staple of their program, but I also think the mental toughness is what really allowed them to be as successful as they are in years past. So my gut reaction is that I just can't see this Utah team folding, or this Utah team really letting that hangover linger from that big loss to Oregon. So I would say with other teams, sure, it can be a factor, and even an excellent team like Washington, I think it played some part in how they played against Arizona State. But when it comes to a team like Utah, I feel that they're more or less bulletproof against having that letdown.
And it may be a minor miracle that without its starting quarterback in Cam Rising, who hasn't played a single snap this season, he's been out for the season, the Utes are still ranked in the top 25, and up until last week were a serious contender for the Pac-12 championship, because let's face it, whatever success this team is having is definitely not due to its passing game.
Yeah, I mean, the bread and butter of this Utah program ever since it joined the Pac-12 really has been their stout defense and their stout running game. And only when Cam Rising became the starting quarterback were they able to get over the hump, present more balanced offenses, and it's no coincidence at all that the ascension of Cam Rising is the reason why Utah is the reigning back-to-back Pac-12 champions. So when Cam Rising did not play all year long, and about 2 weeks ago it was determined that he will not play at all this season just because of the serious knee injury that he suffered in this year's Rose Bowl. This offense basically knew they were going to struggle in the passing game, and it was just one of those, I guess, freight trains that was coming at you, and there's nothing you could have done to stop it. I mean, sure, that their rushing game is good as ever, averaging 172 yards and being an absolute bear for the Sun Devils. The fact that they're still averaging that high of a number after such a lopsided loss just tells you how lethal their ground attack can be. But when you talk about their quarterback, Bryson Barnes, and obviously him and Nate Jackson were splitting duties earlier in the year until they settled on Barnes. You're talking about a quarterback that's definitely not going to sit back there and pick you apart in terms of being a deft passer. So I could definitely see the Arizona State defense just stacking up the line of scrimmage, being more than happy to put their cornerbacks on an island and really dare Barnes to beat you with your arm. Not only because that's the shortcoming of the Utah quarterback and really the shortcoming of that entire offense, but also you have to make sure that you're physical enough up front and you have enough bodies up front to try and slow down this ground attack I mean, things are going so well in that aspect for the Utes that they have a safety, Siona Vaki, who now is actually playing both ways. And now they discovered just another good running back in their arsenal because they had some injuries over there in that position as well. But I think with Utah, the formula to stopping them is pretty simple. But let's not forget, it's also a team that only lost 2 games all year. So it's not like the approach of the ASU defense is going to be any different or more exotic than all the approach of all the teams that Utah played prior to this week. So really halting their ground attack is going to be a monumental assignment. But if it's an assignment that ASU can find success in conquering, then they just might have a chance on an upset.
Yeah, if there is any similarity between ASU and Utah, it's the defense being the strongest element of the team and nearly every week having to carry the offense. So while many in Tempe are encouraged to see a Sun Devil offense break out, scoring 38 points and posting over 500 yards, it would be a great understatement to say that the defense ASU is facing this Saturday is light years better than anything they've faced so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think definitely light years also better than Washington State's defense, who really came into Tempe last weekend as one of the worst defenses in the Pac-12. We talked about it in our preview last week that Arizona State absolutely has to take advantage of that defense. Maybe it took them a little while to get into it, but once they had it rolling and really presented more than anything a balanced offense, that was really the key to success. And I know sometimes it's frustrating that a team like Arizona State that's really trying to find as much positives as possible in a very tough 2-6 campaign is to try to show progress, to show that you can build on the momentum that the offense has right now in the next game. But the next game is like you said, playing a very stout defense in Utah, a team that is definitely strong up front with their defensive line and linebackers, but it's not like their defensive backs are any slouches as well. And really, to try to combat this type of defense, you just cannot allow the pass rush. You cannot allow the extra bodies they're going to put on line of scrimmage to affect you. And you just really need to have a quick release passing offense, and more importantly, just not be one-dimensional. And running on a defense, which I believe only gives up 87 yards on average. Again, keep in mind what happened just last week against Oregon, and still having that impressive average really tells you a lot about how impressive and formidable this unit is. But for Arizona State, they absolutely are going to need to have that balanced attack. I think it does help with the quick release quarterback that Trent Bourget does have that skill in his wheelhouse, and I'll also say that he's also not a quarterback that does sit back and really surveys the field as much as other quarterbacks in the Pac-12 or even on the ASU roster for that matter. But this Utah defense is plenty physical. I don't think they really run a lot of exotic looks or anything like that. They're just basically able to overpower you more often than not. And that's where they find success. You can always talk about winning the battle of the line of scrimmage as being a key to the game, and that might be one of the most overused terms in football. But I just really think when it comes to Utah, that's really the conversation should start and should end, because again, this is not a team that has really exceptional skilled players like other teams in the Pac-12. It's just a team that really, with the so-called meat and potatoes approach, is able to impose their will. That happens on offense with the running game, and that also happens on defense with an excellent pass rush and an excellent run defense that ASU is going to have a real hard time contending with.
So everything we've talked about between these two teams, their mindsets coming into the contest, probably a little different, but will that be enough for Arizona State to win its second consecutive game of the season?
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's just kind of unfortunate that Arizona State has the momentum on offense with an absolute breakout game, a very balanced effort. I mean, there's a lot of coaches and players on that side of the ball who are feeling good about themselves, that they're finally able to maximize the potential of that group. And you have a defense who turned in another great performance. I know when people look at the box score or the stat sheet, the numbers might look a little ugly, but as I said, right after that game against the Cougars, the fact that the ASU defense was able to limit the visitors to only 6 points in the second half, that really tells you all you need to know about that defensive effort. And just yesterday, the Arizona State fan base gets great news that defensive coordinator Brian Ward has agreed to a 3-year contract extension. I'm almost tired, quote unquote, talking about how great Brian Ward is as a defensive coordinator, how much he elevated this defense. And I don't care that the bar was really low in 2022. I think him and his staff deserve all the kudos in the world, the way they coached up those players, the way they attacked the transfer portal with the right components to really complement what I think already was a pretty strong defensive backfield. So again, it's just a matter of that. Yes, ASU is feeling good about themselves, and they have every reason to, but they're still facing one of the best teams in the Pac-12, and a team that might be a little battered and bruised. But as I mentioned in the beginning of our video, I don't think that it's a team that's going to fold because what happened against Oregon last week. Maybe it's not going to be a game where everything's going to click on all cylinders for Utah and really go smoothly. I think Arizona State can make life somewhat hard on Utah, but ultimately I do see Utah bouncing back from their loss last week and beating Arizona State 23-13.
Right, Hode. Well, thank you for your insight. This trip up to Salt Lake City should be a fun one, of course, as we will be there to bring you all the top action and coverage from this contest. So keep it locked in at DevilsDigest.com and hit us with a follow at DevilsDigest on Twitter. For Hode Urbino, this has been Nick Borgia. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you in Utah on Saturday afternoon.